What if anime only had 5 minutes to convince you to watch? Which ones from the spring 2021 anime season would make the cut? That's what I'll explore in today's video, where I'll go over 15 shows from the season and review their first 5 minutes of runtime. Here are the rules. Number 1, all shows are new anime, not continuations, so I'm not biased by past seasons or starting in the middle of an established story. Number 2, I'll be skipping any opening songs, as not all shows will have them in the first 5 minutes, and I want to focus on the content that really matters. And number 3, I won't be reading any summaries ahead of time, so I go in blind unless I'm already familiar with the source material. Let's start with Ijirinaide Nagatoro-san, or Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro. This anime starts off with idyllic outdoor shots, eventually zooming in on a high school while peaceful piano music plays. Then the mood shifts. We get alternating shots of a boy walking nervously down a hallway and Gyaru-type girls inside a library. The last few minutes are spent contrasting the nerdy boy trying to study with the loud girls chattering and making fun of him. What's most striking is that Nagatoro seems a lot more reserved than the other girls at the table, laughing at their jokes but not talking much. After the boy drops his homemade manga, she doesn't take part in the ridicule but instead walks over and picks it up. This anime impressed me with its artistic mood shift and left me wanting to know what makes Nagatoro different from the other girls. I will definitely be watching more. Next is Hige o Soru Soshite Joshikousei o Hirou, or I shaved, then I brought a high school girl home. The first thing I noticed about this anime, other than the strange title, was the voice acting. The leads are voiced by Kazuyuki Okitsu, who played Jonathan Joestar, and Kana Ichinose, who played Ichigo in Darling in the Franxx. Both have very bold voices that immediately drew me into the characters. As far as the plot goes, a man gets rejected by a coworker, and on his way home finds a high schooler who asks to stay overnight at his place. But instead of taking a dark turn, the show subverts expectations. The man vehemently rejects the girl's offer of intimacy and says he wants soup instead. Overall, the bright personalities of the characters and the wholesome plot thread have made me interested. Now let's look at Fumetsu no Anata, or To Your Eternity. This show appears to have a sci-fi premise. An orb becomes a rock, then moss, then a wolf, then has a few minutes of interaction with a person in a rundown snowy hut. The first 5 minutes are all accompanied by narration, which is something I'm not a huge fan of in general. However, there were 2 things that made this more interesting. The first was that the narration is from some kind of outside observer who cast the orb upon the earth, which made me want to know who this being is. The second is that the narrator's voice is very soothing. While I don't think there was anything that wowed me about this show in the opening, I enjoyed it enough to watch more. Up next is Tokyo Revengers. I guess the obvious thing here to start with is the art style. I'm not really sure if it's CG or just 2D that looks a lot like it, but I'm not a fan either way. That said, I'm not the type of person to not watch a show just because of the art. When it comes to the story, the lead finds out that his middle school girlfriend has died, and he ends up getting pushed in front of a train and somehow ends up back in time as his middle school self. Basically, it seems at first glance to be like Erased, except with a smaller time leap and a gang subplot. The first 5 minutes didn't impress me, but I've heard enough good things about the show that I might give it a watch. Let's move on to 86. I appreciate a good military anime, and this one looks like it's going to be pretty interesting from the first 5 minutes. It has an eye-catching opening with a combat scene with some very strange crawling mechanized units, and there's CG here, but it's not too bad. I like the character designs a lot too, especially the interesting detail that white hair seems to be the dominant trait in this republic. I think the story also is less clumsy about its exposition than most, using a news report and mocking comments from soldiers to convey information about the mysterious 86. There also was a nice variety of camera angles. Now it's time for Sentouin Hakenshimasu, or Combatants Will be Dispatched. I'll be honest, I have no idea what is going on. The show starts with 2 girls preparing to send Combat Agent 6 to another planet to set up a base for them while they work to conquer Earth. Then there's a bunch of banter between these people, then 2 more girls get introduced rapid fire, an inventor and a robot who also can explode. I'm fine with starting in the middle of action, but the lack of any context about who these people are, what the company they're in is, or whether they have any actual authority is confusing. There are jokes, but they don't land because we don't know enough about the characters for them to be funny. Also, there's a lot of fan service up front, which is kind of off-putting. Next up is I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level. First, we got reincarnated as a slime, now we have reincarnated as a slime killer. So far, this seems to be a pretty standard isekai. We've got the deceased Saori woman, the ditzy goddess, an RPG-like setting, and a cute guild girl. The interesting twist with this one is that the lead, Azusa, has the perk of immortality. I'm curious to see how the show will pull that off while still maintaining some sort of stakes. The main thing I noticed about this is that Aoi Yuki, one of my favorite seiyuu, is in the lead role, and she's really nailing it so far. Now let's look at Koi to Yobu ni wa Kimochi Warui, or It's Too Sick to Call This Love. This is a romance anime, but unlike in most shows, the main character is an adult businessman. He's shown at first waking up in the bed of a woman he clearly has no connection with, and on his way to work he trips and is saved from falling down the stairs by a girl who turns out to be his younger sister's friend. I'm not sure how to feel about this so far because the lead is kind of creepy, but it's a unique enough dynamic that I think it warrants at least watching a full episode to learn more. There hasn't been anything particularly compelling yet, though. Next is Fairy Tail in Space, Eden Zero. I haven't watched Fairy Tail, but the character designs are pretty much copy and paste, and Happy the Cat doesn't even have a name change. Reusing designs isn't a big deal to me, but I just find it funny. To be honest, I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected. The opening with a boy and his grandfather looking at the stars would be cliché if the grandfather wasn't a robot for some reason, and the fact that the first girl introduced is a video maker whose dream is 1 million subscribers is pretty hilarious. The setting is wacky, the music is epic, and it's a fun time so far. It's time for Osananajimi ga Zettai ni Makenai love comedy, or the rom-com where the childhood friend won't lose. The voice acting really stands out in this one, as I can recognize Yoshitsugu Matsuoka anywhere. So far, story-wise, it's pretty standard. There's an ordinary guy who's interested in a talented, popular girl, and he's got a comic relief best friend. I liked the art style a lot though, and the show also teased an event at a festival where people confess their love in front of the school. I want to see what will come of that, and also where the childhood friend will come in, since the love interest here is someone he met recently. The next anime is Vivy, Fluorite Eye's Song. From what I can gather from the first 5 minutes, this seems like Westworld the anime. It starts with AI robots in a theme park killing people while still gleefully acting like they're welcoming people to the park. After a scientist executes some sort of program, we see an informational video about how AI only have one mission each to avoid confusion. It's a very engaging opening, and I'm interested to see how this type of story works in an anime. This is also animated by Wit Studio, so it looks fantastic, and apparently the story is from ReZero's creator, so I have high hopes. It's just a shame that they brought in the voice of Dio to kill him 5 minutes in. Now, let's look at Full Dive. The ultimate next-gen full dive RPG is even shittier than real life. While the name is certainly interesting, there wasn't really anything in the first 5 minutes that grabbed my attention. In fact, it has most of the things I don't like, opening with exposition through narration, then more heavy-handed exposition through dialogue with a teacher and a classmate, and then a couple of very cartoon bullies. I'm not a fan of the art style also. I might watch a full episode to find out what the game ends up being like though. Next is Mars Red. I have to say that out of all the anime I've looked at so far, this one has the most unique art, at least when it comes to the 2D animation, and the aspect ratio makes it stand out more. There's some CG, but it's used primarily for vehicles and is unobtrusive. Since about half of the opening 5 minutes was just artistic shots of the setting, I didn't get much about the plot, except that it seems like they're hunting vampires if that's what they mean when they say vamps. This show also has the best music out of all the shows so far, with a really strong orchestral soundtrack. I think the visuals and music will get me to watch more. The second to last anime I'll be talking about is Shadow's House. This is another show where the music and art are both very strong from the start. The music alternates between playful and mysterious, almost sinister sounds, and the show is animated by Cloverworks, which usually does a great job with visuals. The mansion setting and the shadow people within it raise tons of questions immediately, as does the fact that the main girl in the show seems somewhat familiar with what she's supposed to do, but also surprised by a lot of things at the same time. The anime does a good job of showing, not telling, as well, as there's very little dialogue in the first 5 minutes. I'm looking forward to watching more of this. Finally, let's discuss Jouran, the Princess of Snow and Blood. This seems to be an alternate history show with supernatural elements. It starts with a quick fighting clip with an interesting black and whitish aesthetic. but then the anime makes you read some exposition and gives you a bunch of years, names, and objects that it's difficult to keep track of. After that, we see the woman who was fighting in her everyday life cooking and working at a bookstore. I'm fine with plots being a slow burn, but so far I don't really have any idea what this will be about. It has an old-timey setting similar to Mars Red, and the art is pretty good, but nothing really drew me in so far. That's it for this week, but next week I'll be back with even more new shows from this season. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for weekly content. I'm Matrix from Matrix A&M, Anime, and more, and I hope you have a great day.